Alright. What's up, everybody? Well, guess what? Yesterday we did a video talking about, we put Euthermal on the thumbnail, talked about him a lot, but it was all regarding a smurfing drama and 2 GM challenges, bronze to GM that I've done, and all these sorts of different things in the past. So I wanted to clarify a few things really quickly, because that video went kind of crazy. There's already over 1,000 comments a day after I posted it, with a huge range of responses, and thank you everyone for being mostly positive in there, and a lot of people actually kind of talking to each other and trying to see each other's viewpoints. Before all that, though, there are a few people attacking Euthermal and saying, screw him. Please stop. I never want to encourage any harassment towards any other player. There's also people going through the comments in the thread just saying to everyone, you're an idiot. How dare you support smurfing? Or you must be a tryhard loser. How dare you don't like smurfing? And for anyone who watched the whole video, they would know that that's exactly what I was trying to steer away from. So my big regret about the video, as I was very emotional, as many of you could tell when I did it, is that I talked about Euthermal too much, way too much. I never intended for the video to be focused on Euthermal. I intended that to be a kicking off point to compare different types of content. And yet by the end of the video, I made a video talking all about Euthermal and his practices. But this is not fair to him at all. I sent him a message apologizing, saying, hey, that was unfair. I wanted to talk about smurfing in general acceptance. And you're not the first person to do it. There's so many that do it. People in the comments have told me apparently Mana, Goblin, Hero Marine, and King Cobra have all been making new accounts and doing various either 2 GM or different challenge content recently. I haven't seen the videos for all of that, so I can't clarify, but I know that this isn't new. Crank did kind of silly strats to GM back in the day. Xanster in 2016 is the first really big viral one I can remember, where he did gasless only to GM, and people were just like, whoa, they were so shocked at the time. It was such a new concept. I remember Nina did worker rush only, and she got to like Masters 1, almost GM, just rushing with workers. So this is not something where I ever should have focused this all on Euthermal. Euthermal is the lightning rod because he's making the best 2 GM content right now. It has the most viewers, has the most mass appeal, the most people are watching it. So my apologies for getting stuck in the weeds with that and talking so much about Euthermal, especially blindsiding him and not giving him heads up. I linked him the video after I posted it, and that was when I woke up, which is probably like 4 or 5 hours after it had gone live. And I should have at least probably given him a heads up on that one. So let's move on from there and let's not talk about Euthermal, because he's not the point of the video. And for anyone who's going, Euthermal bad, stop! The whole point here is I wanted us to have an honest discussion about smurfing and accepting that there are sometimes, you know, we can come to our own personal weighting decisions on when it's worth it, when it's not, and also kind of what smurfing is. I've smurfed way worse than any single 2 GM challenge, because I did a bronze to GM, and that meant leaving more games to get all the way down to bronze. All right, everybody, hello, it is time to smurf. I don't like smurfing. I don't like losing games on purpose so that I can beat people easier than me. But we're doing this in the name of education, in the name of thousands of requests to do so. So let's start. So this is my bronze to GM video. I guess I'll just keep this one muted in the background. 275,000 views. I think this is my most viewed video on YouTube, guys. So why wasn't I talking about this from the start? Because I'm an idiot. I mentioned it in the video, but I should have talked about it more. This is, I think, my highest viewed content, and I'm not trying to excuse myself. I actually completely forgot I mentioned the smurfing at the start of this. I have never watched this video, or at least not in a long time. And I was wondering why people kept coming to me and saying, hey, I know you hate smurfing, but I love bronze to GM and I don't think it matters because it's educational. And I was like, why does people keep saying I hate smurfing? I'm like, I know I do, but how do the casuals know this? Apparently it's in the first 10 seconds of a video, and it's my most viewed video. So yeah, probably should have realized that. So basically, bronze to GM, you smurf twice as hard because you have to lose games down to like bronze or silver. I think this one I managed to get down to bronze too, but I don't think I had to leave too many games to do it. So I was still in provisional MMR for a while. I was able to climb the first few ranks pretty easily, but you always get stuck in the weeds in platinum or diamond, and it ends up being grinding tons of games. What always annoyed me is people would come in and they'd be like, well, that's not smurfing. It's totally fine because it's educational. And I was always like, no, it's not. It is smurfing 100%. So I realized we made a huge misstep at the very beginning of the previous video, guys. Let's fix that right now. So we never defined what smurfing was. And tons of people have been responding saying, I should have, you know, they're like, well, that's not smurfing because insert reason. So basically, guys, smurfing is doing anything intentionally to match with lower ranked players where you're favored. That's how I define smurfing. I know it's probably not in the dictionary, but I think that's a fair definition, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. When I say smurfing, that's what I mean. So the main methods to do that is either leaving matches to get obviously down to lower MMR, easier opponents, or to create a new account. If you're a high level player, you start at about 3k MMR is that kind of the beginning calibration MMR, and playing from there. Now, smurfing doesn't make you the devil. Everyone has to make new accounts at certain points, whether they play on a new region they haven't played on before. We had people sharing stories of how like SOS, when he came to BlizzCon, he had to ladder on NA for the first time to practice with low ping. And there was like Diamond players getting to play SOS, a world champion, for the first time. And they're like, oh my God, I just died to SOS's cheese. And like, that is kind of cool. And it is obviously something which the players can't avoid. So the difference between if players are obviously intentionally creating extra new accounts, or in my case, just, creating a new account and then even de-ranking it as well. So I was doing 2-in-1, made a new account and through games with Bronze to GM. This is double. It's a double whammy on the smurfing. So let's go through all the comments, because from here there was a lot of misconceptions and comments, and I've learned a lot from reading. I've read at least 800 of the 1,000 comments on the video. I've answered a bunch of them. There was some misconceptions, some interesting views that made me change my view, that added context and that sort of stuff. So let's go through them all and talk a little bit about these. So one of the first things that came up and was really big, people kept saying, ethics, are you serious, man? Are you talking about ethics? Talk about making mountains out of molehills. It's a video game, man. This was kind of funny to me because I was like, wait a second. Ethics are defined. I went and looked this up. Ethics are defined as moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. So for those who don't know, I've been doing this full time for 11 years now, since 2011. 12 years, it's 2023. It's my job. It's also a sport I competed in at a full-time level. And, you know, I've been commentating the top games for it. And really, this is my job, my career. It's my sport. It's my life. I love it and care about it. For some people, it might be a video game. They just watch 1 or 2 games of it and play 1 or 2 games. For me, you bet your friggin' damn ass I'm going to have ethics. I'm going to have a moral compass about what's good behavior and what's bad behavior in it. So I think this was just the most ridiculous complaint that people kept saying over and over, and I wanted to get that one out of the way straight away. Okay, so the next thing that came up was I made an analogy in the video where I said, look, when a Smurf's playing someone who's much lower than them by a certain amount where the other person can't reasonably win, it's basically like, you know, Floyd Mayweather, you know, beating up a small child. And people got really angry at this, and I was like stunned. So I had about 50 plus comments of people saying, you think this is the same as causing brain damage to a child? What the hell, Pig? That's disgusting. This is the worst analogy ever. I can't believe you would say this. This kind of cracked me up at first. Is like, it felt like there was like a cartoon moment where the blood ran out of my ears. And I was just like, what? Oh no, like I was just trying to give an analogy of a really high level competitor versus someone that can't beat them, to the point where the high level competitor can put one hand behind their back, dance around in a circle, and still beat them. I guess a better analogy is you're playing Novak Djokovic. You rock up to your 13-year-old, you're playing a tennis competition, Saturday morning, you rock up, and the other guy rocks up, he's a 13-year-old as well. Because remember, the internet's synonymous. So when you rock up to the ladder, you assume it's someone in your MMR range. Halfway through the match, you realize he's playing with one hand behind his back, dancing around, doing like handstands and hitting it. And then at the end of the match, or even a week or 2 later, you see a video, Novak Djokovic wearing a trench coat beats up 13-year-old in game, right? And or maybe he teaches bronze to GM tennis, and that's how he does it, right? Like that's the analogy I've got. All I'm trying to do is draw a comparison between someone who has no chance of losing, unknowingly, playing against someone who thought they were going into a fair match. So another one was players kept saying, look, Pig uses the low APM handicap, and therefore the games are competitive. It's like they're playing a real silver or gold player. And I think a really good example of this with bronze to GM, since I really want that to be the talking count point here in this video, because that's what I'm thinking about, because it's way more personal for me, and it allows me to really ruminate on it. So if you have a handicap, then it's okay, because you're actually playing like that league. So I was always saying, when I did bronze to GM, that my opponents had a 0% chance versus me until higher leagues. Basically, I never really lost. I think I lost some games in Diamond in some of my bronze GMs, like 1 or 2, and then a few in like Masters GM, and that was it. Whereas Vibe, on the other hand, said, look, I'm really playing like a silver player. Like, obviously, I had restrictions, but they weren't as fierce. Whereas Vibe was like, I'm playing like a silver player. I'm playing super slow. I'm not going to watch any fights. I'm really trying to play like a silver player. And he would slowly grind through the games and beat his opponents that way. So a few people had issue with me comparing it to Vibe's Bronze to GM because there was points where I used advanced mechanics. Like there was the comment I went over in the previous video where I used rapid fire to warp in 10 stalkers just by waving my mouse and holding a button down, which they said, well, no bronze, silver, or gold player is going to know how to do that. But they also saw moments which were much more justified where I would get in a hard spot and I would instantly, my muscle memory would take over. I'd do something really quickly to defend it. And then after the fact, I'd often go, you know what? That was a bit unfair. A gold player probably couldn't do that mechanic I just did that quickly. That's kind of shitty of me, but basically the reason I was in the bad position, I wouldn't have needed to do that, and I would explain the mistakes I'd made up to that point, right? So for me, I was like, look, I'm still teaching, and at least I'm not losing the game. But to be fair, Vibe's content was way more authentic as him pretending a silver or gold player, and a lot of players said that's why his was better. I was just smurfing. Like, Pig, you were just smurfing. Vibe was actually teaching with his content, and it's something I could learn from. I then looked at Vibe's content and saw that he'd won 100% of his games up to platinum, and I'd won 100% of my games up to platinum. And I guess the real issue here is the self-imposed restriction of certain things. Because you can restrict yourself and keep the difficulty at the point where it seems close, but also you can still barely just win every game, right? And for me, at the end of the day, the win percentage has to be the only objective factor here, because I can claim I'm putting enough of a restriction to make it like I'm playing a gold player, but if I beat every gold player I play, I'm not really playing like a gold player, am I? So what I am is I'm making it more palatable, I'm making it look more fair, but I'm not actually doing that. So for me, at the end of the day, I do think it's more entertaining content if you are playing at that league. I absolutely agree with that. I think it's more easy to learn from. However, I think the handicap issue is that it's self-imposed and can be adjusted at any point, and it can be adjusted in very small ways. So it's one of these things where if you're truly giving yourself a hard enough handicap for whatever league you're in to the point where you're not smurfing, you would be losing a lot more of your games. And that's something where Bronze to GM can never be smurfing, because no one's going to sit there losing a bunch of games in Silver League, playing like a silver player to teach. We'd take forever to get out of bronze and silver, forever to take out of gold. It would be even worse smurfing, or it wouldn't be even worse smurfing, but it would be boring to watch if we were winning 50-50. Essentially, if you're winning almost all of your games, you are always smurfing. That is simply the way it is. Over a big enough sample size, that's just the only objective measure I can use for this. Okay, so here's another one which came up a lot. It's just a game. Who cares if you lose one game? Boo-hoo, get over it, nerd. Now, this is a really interesting one, because I even had a pro poker player in my chat yesterday talking about this, and I was like, on an individual level, 100%. You as an individual, if someone beats you in a video game, you're going, fucking, they're all Smurfs, man. That's like a really interesting thing in human psychology, where you start blaming outside things. You see Smurfs even in games where they don't exist, and you start getting really like emotional and silly about it. So don't get me wrong, that's really bad for your own consciousness. And just because I'm talking about this, it's not to make you guys think there's way more Smurfs out there than there are. There's not that many Smurfs out there. I'm just trying to discuss what smurfing is, what isn't, make sure we understand where the line can potentially be drawn, and discover that through this discussion. It is a real thing though, where if you play ladder and you're severely outmatched, you're getting clowned on by a silly strategy while you're trying your hardest. It can be upsetting. But basically, when you click ladder, you're not really signing up for that, are you? So it is something where if someone's signed up for that sort of match, it's a bit of a different thing. But if someone only gets to play a few games a week, they happen to run into a Smurf in a 3-game ladder session, it can have a negative effect on their experience, and it can definitely hurt players from wanting to continue playing the game. Also, the whole idea of it's just one game that one person lost, right? That's also something where I think that's not really the case. I did 3 bronze to GMs and played so many games. I did even, at some point, I ran into one guy 3 times, I think, across 2 leagues. We got really unlucky. I ran into him 3 times, and I felt so bad after those games, because like that was really crap for that guy's experience, right? And he was not happy about it at all. Vibe, I think, did 6 bronze to GMs. Winter's still doing low APM to Masters. Remember, I mentioned a bunch of other names. So many people have done this content over the last year. So there's actually hundreds and thousands of these games stacked up over StarCraft's history, and there's millions of people viewing it as well. So the way it's always balanced out in the past, and to some extent today as well, is there's a reputational loss in the hardcore community whenever you do smurfing content. I talked about this, how people shat on me for doing bronze to GM. I still have some people who still support the channel, but say, please never do another bronze to GM. I hated that shit, man. I had to tune out every time. Really irked me the wrong way. Everyone else I'm sure Mana's getting even a tiny bit of it now. He's starting to do it. Everyone is. You always get a few people who say, I don't like smurfing and how friggin' dare you do this. But you also see huge support. So despite that vocal minority that are going to give you crap, you'll get tons of new players and you're saying, oh, this got me to the game. This is so sick. And you'll basically, you know, have this kind of push and pull between some people who give you a lot of shit for it and give you a bit of reputational loss, but also a lot of new people who come in and find your content for the first time. Essentially what happens, and the reason those people get angry is you can adjust your handicaps, your level of focus to the situation. You can make the game very competitive and very close, where you have to play really hard to win, but you don't actually ever really have to put yourself at more than a small risk of losing. Due to what we were talking about before with how you're the person who adjusts the difficulty on a whim. So you're kind of choosing where that line ends up being. So what appears to be a very competitive match, like I said, going back to the previous point, you get to 15 or 30 wins. Even if you say, look, oh, I'm seeing how far I can get with this build. I'm going to just teach you guys how to play in Silver League and play like a Silver League player like I do. Like, at the end of the day, I won 30 games to get to Platinum or Diamond or whatever it was, and 50 games probably to get GM. I don't know, 50, 60, I don't know how many. It was different for each series depending on how quick I got through the provisional MMR. At the end of the day, it is just smurfing. The only objective thing I can look at there is the win-loss ratio, which is like 98% for a bronze to GM, and say, yep, that is smurfing, and that's not good on its own. Now, there's still plenty of people who are saying the content's okay. We'll get to that because they enjoy the content and they think it's worth that. But it's okay to have both of these beliefs. So let's touch on that early. We'll get to it in a little bit. It's okay to like the content and agree with it and support it, and at the same time say the smurfing aspect is bad. That is, I know this is really hard. This is like doing magic in Name of the Wind. You got to hold two opposing thoughts in your brain at once to pull off your sympathy trick. It's okay, guys. Pull out your mummet and we can see exactly what goes on. So for me, the scary thing is if the content becomes too prevalent and encourages people, and smurfing runs rampant in a, you know, unmanaged ladder, Blizzard's very hands-off, it kind of just becomes crappy for everyone playing. Now, obviously, I don't think one person doing this content is going to do it, but I do feel that if too many people and too many pros and high-level players start making new accounts and doing this content over and over, there can be a pattern. If we reduce that reputational loss that I was talking about, and instead just say it's all good, free for all, go for it. There is no acceptance that, hey, this is bad. You know, smurfing is not good, but it's done for a good cause. And we just go, everyone does it. Obviously, it can lead to a cascade effect where way too many people on the ladder are leaving games and smurfing. And essentially, it just messes up the entire ladder. And it turns it from a fair environment to an unfair, unpredictable environment. And it becomes very unsatisfying for most of the players. Whilst a single player will not do this by smurfing one game, you will not ruin the whole ladder. It doesn't change the fact that on a broader scale, it can. So right after making the video yesterday, I was streaming. So I had an interaction with a viewer who came on my channel and they said, you know, I don't really see the issue with smurfing. I'm totally down with it and all of the 2GM content. But then again, I am a smurf. And I kind of asked them a few questions. I said, well, why do you smurf? Like, what do you mean? Do you just like make new accounts all the time? They said, yeah. Basically, they're like, I always get to the point where it feels way too competitive. The games are way too hard and stressful. So I make a new account and then I steadily rank up to that point. And then I'll eventually get too stressed out. It's too competitive and I'll make another account. And I think the reason I want to have this discussion is just so we can put in the open that I think that behavior is not good at all. And I think talking about this openly is going to remind everybody in the community that that behavior is not good at all. I want us to be able to openly say that, right? And that should be something that we can say, while at the same time saying, I choose to give a free pass to Pig for Bronze to GM because of X. And those are two competing viewpoints, but we need to be able to at least accept the negative and openly talk about it. Okay, so another big point that came across in the comments was the game is dying. Look, StarCraft's old. 12 years, 13 years old at this point almost, and 2GM content keeps it alive. Bronze to GM, whatever challenge to GM, it brings new players in, and that is worth it. Now, this is a really sticky one because I have personally seen huge benefit and so many people saying they're back playing StarCraft or they've gone from just being a viewer to a player for the first time because of Bronze to GM content. And that is such a positive thing, and it's good for my career. I would estimate I've made over $10,000 from doing my Bronze to GM series. When you take into account the virality of it, the new players it's brought into my channel who've started being regular viewers or watched my Twitch stream and supported there or supported my Patreon, it is a huge financial gain for me as a content creator. That's obviously a rough estimate. It's very hard to guess. It could be more than that. could be less, but this is from like the virality and the number of new players it brings in and viewers is huge for a content creator. So on a selfish level, it's huge, but it's also easy for me to then say, well, I'm helping the player base, I'm helping the game. It's hard for me individually to separate my own selfish interest for I'm helping the game by bringing those players in. And that's why this is really hard for me to even think about clearly. I don't know. On the other hand, people have been saying StarCraft's dying for 10 years. In 2014 was having conversations with League of Legends commentators in the local scene when we were at events who were like, hey man, StarCraft's on the down. You know, when are you going to start moving out of it? Like, what's the next step? That was almost 9 years ago. And obviously it hasn't died. So for me, it's really hard when people say comments like this, because unless Stormgate comes out within the next 6 months and totally destroys it, I think there's going to be 1 million people still playing StarCraft very regularly, whether in team games, co-op, and at least 200,000-300,000 people playing 1v1 ladder every single week for years to come. I think even when another great RTS comes, there'll still be 100,000 players active on the ladder. So for me, I find it really hard to say, look, just because we're not as big as Roblox, anything is worth it to get new viewers and players in it. We don't have any ethics. And I think the reason people are saying this is because they think what I'm saying and when people talk about smurfing being bad, stop all fun content, stop all cool content, follow a strict rules. Every game has to be a boring, hardcore, silent, serious match. And obviously, like, that's not what I'm saying at all. But it's something where I just don't think we can justify throwing all kind of standards out the window because the game isn't as popular as we'd like it to be. To me, this argument doesn't line up. So we mentioned how the system right now is balanced between hardcore players giving you shit if you smurf and refusing to support you, but you get rewarded with lots of new viewers. Now, when I saw all the Reddit thread comments between these two types of viewers being like, smurfing bad, I don't like it, and people being like, oh, you're a fucking tryhard, shut up, idiot, like, content's good, why do you have to tear everything down? You guys have I can't believe you think smurfing's bad or this or that smurfing. And that kind of triggered me because there was a lot of personal attacks towards people saying you must be a loser, you must be a real virgin. Sorry, that's a word I use too much jokingly, and yeah, but essentially it's just, you know, people were throwing shit and saying essentially there's no real argument that smurfing is bad or that this or that is smurfing. And this is something that just ticks me off, and it has the whole time I've done Bronze to GM and for many years, because I'm like, it is smurfing. Smurfing is not good. That is something we can absolutely, like, objectively, it just is. And I haven't seen, if someone can change my mind on that, please let me know. I just haven't seen any arguments. I've seen people make really decent arguments as to why they're okay with it. I just don't see how you can argue against it being smurfing and the smurfing aspect itself being bad. So the next big point was people kept saying intention matters. Look, Pig, if your intention isn't to troll, you're trying to teach people it's not bad to do a Bronze to GM. And I said, look, okay, that's not as bad as trolling people and laughing at them. It doesn't mean that it's not still hurting the experience of the 50 or so players that I beat in an unfair match doing a Bronze to GM, and that it can potentially promote that behavior for other people. I can create really positive, valuable content while also causing bad effects. Those two things can exist. It's up to you which one you value more as a viewer, as a consumer, as a ladder player. From the comments in the last video, they were overwhelmingly saying, I like most of this content enough that I'm okay with it. Any content creator that does it, I'm okay with it. Some people were saying, actually, I'm turning against it because there's too much of it now. There was a range, but the majority of people seemed to be okay with it. A lot of people, though, were suggesting, since I was talking about Bronze to GM, they're like, why don't you just get people of each league to play customs against to showcase all the same stuff? They opt in. They're okay to get player someone higher level. You're not ruining their experience. They know what they're signing up for. And it draws a clear line against smurfing the ladder, and it should be a similar viewing experience. Now, the reason I didn't do this, and people were suggesting this before I did the Protoss, my third Bronze to GM, and that's where I probably had a much bigger chance, where it was more in my mind, and I was like, maybe I should do that. The reason I didn't do it is it takes a lot of effort. It's hard. It also, especially in the lower leagues, results in some wonky games because people get that deer in the headlights effect. They're like, I'm on camera. Oh God, I'm going to be in a video. But the thing is, Bronze, Silver, Gold is actually like crazy enough games anyway. If you actually get enough players you're playing against, you can still get very good matches, and you can still teach the same fundamentals. Because let's be real, Bronze, Silver, Gold is all about teaching internal focus on your build and very little focus on what your opponent's doing, right? There's not much reacting, especially in Bronze and Silver, right? There's a little bit once you get to Gold and a few more battle cruisers arrive, but up to that point, not so much. It is harder to do. Obviously, though, people say, well, but you're not queuing into the ladder, so it's not the same as the ladder experience. And the thing is, I would argue that it does just take more effort. People say, but we don't see the relatable graduation through the leagues. I can just put a graphic up showing the level, though, that I'm at. I can go 2200 MMR opponent, 2400 MMR, 2500. I can work my way up there. I can show a graphic with the progress. And with enough effort, I'm not sure there's that much of a difference, other than the fact that I need to do so much effort to plan it out and to get the players of the right ranks in, and that especially, obviously, finding bronze players is near impossible. Silver players is also a little tricky, so definitely that lower end, getting the show going would be very, very difficult, and it would take a lot more work, but I feel like I never really gave it a fair effort, so I think this might be a cop-out on my part. All right, so the next thing that kept coming up was people saying, it's creative and pushing the boundaries, and not just a basement nerd trying to feel good about themselves by beating up weaker players, and other variations of, look, it's okay for content, but not for others. So this is an interesting idea. If it's for content, it is okay as a blanket statement. I was thinking about this and I was like, maybe that's just the rule we have. We can just say, look, it's really bad for you guys. Please don't do this, but we can do this as content creators. I thought about it for a little bit and I was like, but what if they only stream with 5 viewers? Is the 2 GM challenge for a GM player who has no viewership, they have 5 viewers, is that okay? Where do we draw the line? It's easy if we do this to say, well, the biggest content creators are allowed to do it, but I feel like there's no firm rule you can draw here, because if the biggest creators can do it, why can't the smaller creators do it? And that's the sort of situation where you're saying we have a different standard for bigger content creators than smaller content creators, which to me is super unfair, right? Let me know your thoughts on that one. You got the chance to play a pro. How can you not be thankful for that? Stop being salty over losing. Use this as a great resource to learn. So I think a lot of people complaining in the Reddit thread, telling me they don't like my bronze to GM, they aren't people who lost a game to me or another GM player. What they are complaining is that there's a lot of people who copy what we do and see it as acceptable afterwards. And in an anonymous online gaming environment where it's free to make an account, that can hurt the integrity of the gaming environment, right? It can hurt the ladder experience. Players aren't signing up for that. Remember as well, on the point of being upset, look, these players didn't sign up for this. They're often aware that the opponent's dunking on them, especially when we do crazy challenges. I play people, like I said, at my main MMR or 500 MMR below, and the players I play often still are like, God, I'm going to be in a video, aren't I? Because they know this is a silly strategy, I'm getting dunked on, and they're like, God damn it. And that's not even me smurfing. So people know that at the same level. When you're also playing someone lower level, it often is aware that you're getting Harlem Globetrotted on, you know that there is this show match. So you realize that partway through. If you knew who you're playing against and signing up for that experience of someone doing silly handicaps with fantastic execution, that's different. And this is why I wish Blizzard wasn't just off getting milk at the corner store and haven't come back in a few years. Let's just, Daddy Blizzard, they left a few years ago. They haven't been back, guys, unfortunately. So if we had chess.com, they have a feature where content creators say, I'm doing a beginner to GM. And what actually ends up happening is people opt in to play against them in a separate queue, and they get their points refunded. So they don't lose or gain MMR for playing the content creator, but the content creator can still climb through the ranks and have a really authentic experience. I'm like, this just solves all of this for content creation. Oh, how beautiful is that? Like, so many people were telling me about this in the comments, like chess.com does this great method, and I'm like, that's so sick. I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous. Why? Why can't we have a Blizzard that builds things like this? All right, so also on the point of learning, right? Why don't you just use this as a resource to learn? You might not be able to learn, right? Obviously, a lot of players don't have the knowledge to dissect everything that's going on in unorthodox play and how to deal with it. Also, when you're adjusting your level to that player, you might be like way better than them on one thing and way worse than something else, right? So it can be a bit of a weird experience for them. Don't get me wrong. I think every player individually should try to learn from every single loss, but whether people use it to learn or not, I think is besides the point. All right, so I do think it's great reaching new players at the moment, but with my bronze to GM, I think it's a bit unethical for me to keep making new accounts rather than just, doing something else and saying, look, I've already got 3 out there. There's still a lot of things I didn't teach in bronze to GM that people keep reminding me about because it's just not covered there and I keep getting questions about it. But it's hard for me to justify going all the way through those leagues again with each race. It's hard for me to justify that. For me, the real problem is no matter how much I put the handicap on, at the end of the day, if I'm winning 90% plus of my games, it speaks for itself. So The restrictions need to be so great that I'm actually losing games. Otherwise, it's just always going to be smurfing, which, you know, abusing the ladder system, prioritizing my experience over others. So that's just the kind of impasse that I'm at right now, which I can't get past. It is, however, entertaining and helps new players. It does, though. And dude, like, I've had so much benefit from Bronze to GM, and it's so good in terms of the accessibility of this sort of content. It's so easy to consume, and it gets out to so many players. It does come at the cost of promoting a bad practice, though. So on its own, one show isn't going to change anything. But if enough people start doing these challenges, I do think it will have a cumulative effect. And that's why I think it's important, as we do shows like this, to also have an open discussion about, like, hey, there's a bad aspect to it, and we've got to be really wary of that. Even if we decide, most of us say we're okay with still promoting this sort of content, I think we just need to openly be able to say there is a dark side to it. And maybe it's not as big of a deal for you, especially if you don't ladder and you just consume content. You don't care at all, right? But for people who ladder, I think the actual people playing the game are very important, and I really want to prioritize them having a fair experience on the ladder. With all that in mind, I think the next time you guys see someone who says, I don't like this shitty behavior, please don't personally attack them, would be my ask for you. Try to understand where they're coming from. At the same time, if you guys don't like smurfing, don't necessarily be so extreme and aggressive in those comments. There's been already a few people who are saying, you know, you're disgusting, you're a terrible person, to myself and other content creators. I would advise you to try to have a bit more of a middle ground and just be a little less extreme, even when you are, you know, judging either these content creators or these other players, even if you are clearly saying, I don't think this behavior is good and we shouldn't do it. And that's okay. You can have that viewpoint 100%. I will never try and dissuade you from wherever you fall on this this debate, right? At the end of the day, Bronze to GM is the McDonald's of educational content. It's, you know, accessible, easy to digest. You can get it everywhere really quickly, goes out to lots of people. Everyone loves it, especially when they're first, you know, little kids and they're not really into fine dining yet. But it is something where it's a shitty practice for me to keep making new accounts for this 2GM content. I see it not that differently from purposely leaving matches to lower your MMR, and as I said at the start of the video, I purposely did both for Bronze to GM, and you have to, because you'll never get placed in Bronze, very rarely even Silver, from losing your 5 placement matches. But I also love content creators that do a lot of this content. A lot of my friends do this content. I focus a lot on youth in the video. I've already apologized for that. Hero Marine, Mana, everybody out. There's so many people who've done this. So many of my friends over this. Crank, the most respected Korean commentator. I found out from the comments that he did a crazy strats to GM as well. Like, this is not a new thing, but it's something where I think the divide between the casual fans eating it up and the hardcore fans who are like, go F yourself, it's bigger than it's ever been. And that's why I think it's important to have this discussion. So for me personally, this video is what I learned from this. Well, I've discussed my views on all those individual points, but like, what do I take away? What is my growth from this? I thought long and hard. I've read almost 1,000 comments. I've consumed so much. I've talked to so many different friends and people about this, and I've finally been able to figure out my path forward. After much deep thought, concentration, and really thinking about what's good, what's bad, where do I stand, I'm going to be moving forward by doing more Smurf content. That's right. I'm going to be starting this week a few extra strategy to GM challenges. Things like Nexus rushes in their base, crazy stuff like that. I'm going to see how far I can take some of the stupidest challenges you've ever seen. So dumb that I probably won't get to GM with a lot of them. I'm going to do Bronze to GM round 2. I'm going to start that the week after as well. Harder restrictions on myself, lower APM, accepting that more losses will happen as I play with those extreme restrictions at each league. The catch is, though, hold on a second. I'm going to try and do them with volunteers. I'm going to try and do them ethically, the word which a lot of you don't like me using, and that's going to be really hard. That means I have to source players of the correct ranks. That means I need to have multiple strategies I'm working on when doing challenges, so the person I'm playing against has no idea what strategy I'm doing. Because if I'm just doing one strategy in a stream, they're going to anticipate it. So I need to be more prepared than ever so they don't know what's coming. I'm also going to take these 2 styles of content that I've done variations of in the past to the next level. I'm going to plan them out a lot better to try and basically allow this to work. Because in the past, it hasn't worked because I've been like, oh, I'll see if I can get someone from Twitch chat. Oh, they freeze up under pressure, deer in the headlights. It's not as engaging. Give up. But I actually really want to see if I can make this work, and I'm super motivated to do it. I don't think it's going to get anywhere near Euthermal's views. There's people out there who've been like, you idiot, you're nowhere near as good as Euthermal. I'm not. Euthermal is a much better player. He's always been better with fun strats, even as a pro player than me. And this is not a me versus him thing at all, guys. So this is literally something where I just want to see if I can do this content in a more engaging way than what I've been doing up to now. And seeing if I can do it with volunteers on the ladder, adding in graphics to show progression, and having a very clear skill progression up that ladder where we make sure we are playing of people of a graduating skill level with all sorts of different situations. I don't know if it's going to work out. Maybe this content's going to crash and burn and people are going to be like, that's why you do 2 GM content, Pig. But I'm excited to see if I can make it work. And that's the goal. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you'll join me on this journey, and I'll be seeing you this next Wednesday, my time, Tuesday, North America and Europe. That's going to be my live stream day where I used to do Bronze to GM back in the day, and I'm going to be working on Bronze to GM or a 2 GM challenge. And we're going to experiment, we're going to see how it goes, and I'm going to have a heck of a lot of fun doing it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Goodbye and good night.